Muhammad claims to be a prophet around 40 years old, which is 610 AD. And then for the first 13 years, he's preaching a message of monotheism. He's preaching a message of taking care of widows and orphans. He himself was an orphan growing up. His father died before he was born. His mother died shortly thereafter. So he saw the conditions of the underprivileged, and he argued that we should support them and take care of them. That's what his ministry was like for the first 13 years. But when he ultimately fled to Medina, that is when he was able to start fighting. That is when he had an army at his control. And it was that very year that he started launching raids. And from that point till his death, we see a crescendo, an escalation of violence in his life. The Quran is not in chronological order. So chapter 1 is not the first. Chapter is actually in the 90s is the first one. The last chapter chronologically to have been composed is Surah 9. It is, bar none, the most violent. It's called 𝗙𝗿𝗲𝗏, which means the chapter of disavowal. And it's basically disavowing all treaties with polytheists and also with Jews and Christians. And it tells Muslims to fight the unbelievers, to slay the infidels wherever you find them, take them captive and lay siege to them. That's chapter 9, verse 5. Chapter 9, verse 29 says specifically, Jews and Christians, fight them until they are subjugated and pay you money. Why? A few verses later, because Islam has been made to prevail over every other religion. Chapter 9, verse 33. Chapter 9, verse 111 is the one that says, if you die in jihad, you will go to heaven. So it launches Muslims right before Muhammad dies into this undelimited warfare. There was no end in sight, it was just fight. And that's why Muslims were able to conquer 1/3 of the known world. I'm talking from the shores of the Atlantic to the valleys of India within about 150 years. Islam is a religion of peace. It's found nowhere in the Quran. It's found nowhere in the Hadith. It's not even really found in any polemical literature, any commentaries until the 20th century. So this is a modern phrase that was invented by people in India who were interacting with British folk. This was before India was reverted to its own control. And so that's where we see the phrase Islam is a religion of peace coming up in interactions between Western culture and Islam, usually when we're talking about polemics and apologetics. Now, how do we mean the phrase Islam is a religion of peace? If we mean that there are peaceful Muslims, no one can argue with that. I would say the vast majority of Muslims in the world are peaceful, and I would say that without hesitation. But if we say Islam is a religion of peace, that's problematic because, again, Muslims are not Islam. Islam is the system. And like I said, Muhammad had been fighting from the first year that he could until he died. And he launched Muslims into battle such that they conquered 1/3 of the known world, and then they kept fighting. From that time until the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Muslims had a significant degree of military control throughout the world. It's really hard to say in any way that Islam is a religion of peace when we're talking about physical peace. Muhammad only fought defensive battles. He was trying to protect the ummah, the Muslim people. The fact is, though, when you get past the modern narratives and you start reading the text of the Quran directly, and you start reading the history of Muhammad's life directly, there's no question that's not the case. He launched raids. Even the first battle that the Muslims fought, the Battle of Badr, was a result of a raid that he launched against a caravan that Muslims fought. And so from the beginning, there's no real distinction actually in that time between offensive and defensive battles. If you have an enemy, you fight them, is basically the way people saw it. And that wasn't just Muslim, that was everyone back then. But you cannot argue that Islam conquered 1/3 of the known world defensively. That doesn't make any sense. Growing up, I had been taught that Islam was a religion of peace. I didn't use that phrase as if it were a propaganda or a lie. That's what I was taught as a Muslim, and therefore I truly believed it. And that's why when I hear Muslims say today Islam's a religion of peace, I don't accuse them of lying. But after September 11th happened, people wanted answers. How do you explain what these people did? Clearly they did it in the name of Allah. What about all the other incidents? If it were a one-off thing, maybe that could just be, them. But tons of people are doing this around the Muslim world, so how do you explain it? And it was through investigating their perspective. Those terrorists, they don't say, they don't do it silently. They tell you why they do it. And going back to the history of Islam, looking at the Quran, looking at Muhammad's life to say, what do these texts actually teach? And it was in the course of investigating my faith objectively as possible, that I encountered a violent reality of Islam. Islam is a religion, it's a system, it's a political, socio-religious, legal system. Muslims are people. And if we want to understand this, we can think about, for example, Christianity. You've got billions of Christians around the world, but they don't all believe the same thing. Even if the Bible says something, that doesn't mean all Christians believe it. Far from it. People have different interpretations. Some people might never have read the Bible. Some people might be Catholic and import a Catholic tradition. Some people might be Protestant and import a Protestant tradition. Same way with Islam. You've got Islam, which is the system, and Muslims of all kinds of stripes, denominations, cultural backgrounds, levels of devotion. And so Muslims are all different people. So we should treat them, especially from our perspective as Christians, we should treat Muslims as image bearers of God, broken though they might be. Whereas we can criticize Islam as a system, we should love the people. The problem is that people will see a criticism of Islam as a criticism of Muslims. And I actually kind of appreciate that, because I like the compassion. I like the idea that we should be looking out for those who might come under the gun for being minorities. So I appreciate that. The problem is, though, that Islam is not Muslims. And so when I'm talking about the Islamic faith, the history of Islam, I'm not criticizing Muslims. My mom is a Muslim, my father is a Muslim. I love Muslim people, but I worry about some of the things Islam teaches, because that can affect those who believe the religion. Now, the term jihad itself means struggle. Now, because of that, some people will argue from the Islamic apologetic side that it's an internal struggle, a spiritual striving against oneself. And technically, it can mean that. But in the Quran, the majority of the times it is used, the vast majority, it implies a physical, violent struggle. And in Muhammad's life, we see that very clearly. When he encourages people to engage in jihad, he means to fight physically, to be ready to go out and emigrate and fight. And so after Muhammad's life, after the Quran, as Islamic tradition was being concretized into Sharia, into Islamic law, a very specific meaning of the word jihad came around, a legal term it became, a doctrine, which is fighting physically for the defense of the Islamic faith, or for the propagation of the Islamic faith. And so that's what jihad ultimately came to mean. Not all Muslims are Islamic jurists.
Right.
They don't know what the tradition is, so they will hear what their imam has told them, or they'll absorb it from their Islamic environment. For example, when I was raised as a Muslim, I was raised in the West. And so in the West, we say Islam is a religion of peace. And so jihad, I interpreted to be a solely defensive endeavor. Whereas in parts of the world that have seen Islamic power for centuries, for example, Arabia, the word jihad is often understood in a different light because of their context. Their leaders will often give a much more historical account of the term jihad, which is one of the things that is enjoined upon Muslims for the sake of the religion. There were rules of jihad that were concretized a few hundred years after Muhammad. So Muhammad didn't lay out these rules per se. After the hadith, the traditions of Muhammad's life were collected, then people systematized, codified jihad. And in that codification process, there were conditions listed. A jihad should only be launched in defense of the Muslim people or for the purposes of advancing the Islamic faith. So it doesn't have to be just defensive. And it should be launched by a leader of the Muslim people. So this is why some people argue that after the Ottoman Empire fell, you couldn't have a legitimate jihad until ISIS came, because ISIS is establishing its own caliphate. And this is why it's such a big issue across the Islamic world, whether to recognize the caliphate of ISIS or not, because if so, then they could launch officially recognized jihad. So it's actually, yeah, these rules are important. I was actually speaking to a pastor in Nigeria the other day, and he said that in his neighborhood in Jos, Nigeria, before Muslims attack, and it happens quite regularly, they will distribute pamphlets saying, "Be forewarned, we will be attacking you."
Really?
Yeah, and it's sometime within the next 2 weeks after those pamphlets come, and you ask the question, why would they do that? Because it is one of the rules of jihad. You have to tell the people that they are going to be attacked. So Sharia, specifically in Arabic, means the way, or the way to water. And imagine in the desert what that means. This is how you're supposed to live. This is how you'll receive life from God. So whereas in the Christian faith, the problem with man is sin, which has destroyed us. In the Islamic faith, it's not. The problem with man in Islam is ignorance. And so Islam teaches if you just know the way to live, then you will please God and you can earn your way into heaven, more or less, with God's grace. So that is why Sharia is so important. Muhammad tells people exactly how to live, what to do, whether you can wear gold or not as men, how many women you can marry, how many times a day to pray. That's all Sharia. as a part of understanding the codification, the law of Sharia, different schools of Islam developed. 4 Sunni schools in one branch of Islam, which is called Shia Islam. All of those see Sharia slightly differently. Major overlaps, for example, all 5 schools of Sharia teach that if you leave Islam, you can be killed for it. All 5 of them teach that. But then there's differences between the 5 as well, like how to pray or whether a woman has to give her consent before being given into marriage. So that's how Sharia differs, and it's directly related to jihad as well, because the extrapolation of jihad from the Quran and the Hadith depends upon one's view of Sharia. What has happened is these schools of thought, which were organically developed over centuries, are now moot. They're more or less obsolete because people can go to the internet and they can read what the Quran says for themselves. They weren't able to do that before. They can go to the Hadith and read the Hadith for themselves. And so that people are now bypassing all these traditions, going straight back to the Quran and the Hadith. They're seeing the tremendous violence that are found in Muhammad's life and in the Quran. And that is causing them to do one of 3 things. It's causing them to either become nominal and say, I'm hands off, I don't want to do this. It's causing them to become apostates like me. I saw the violence and I said, this is not the true religion. Or it's causing them to become radicalized. They're saying, this is what Islam teaches, well, that's my religion, I have to follow it. And that's why we're seeing this upsurge, not just in radicalization, certainly we are, but also in people leaving Islam and in people becoming nominal. When we use the term Reformation, we assume that means making something peaceful. Whereas in reality, the term reform is implying to go back to the origins and to reform around that. And so whereas in Christianity, when we reformed, it meant going to Jesus' teachings and seeing that he taught a religion of peace. Jesus did. When people reform Islam, it's going back to the origins of the Islamic faith and saying, wait a minute, it's tremendously violent. So the Muslim Brotherhood, established in 1928, their primary goal when it was established was to follow the Hadith and the Quran. And look what happened. Offshoots of the Muslim Brotherhood are Boko Haram, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. This is the Islamic Reformation. The violent jihad that we see. The only way to fix this within the Islamic framework, and I'm not sure this is possible, but it would be to reimagine Islam, which some people are trying to do. They're called progressive Muslims. But I'm not sure that will work because Islam has always been defined by the Quran and Muhammad's life, and it teaches what it teaches.